We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast right here on the We Made This podcast network. I'm your regular host, Mark, and with me as always is Kurt. Hello, Kurt.
Hello, how are you?
Not too bad. But Kurt, it isn't just you as me, as is our usual. We have got a guest host. Welcome back to the show, Colin.
Evening. How you doing?
Hi. Not too bad. I've been watching Red Dwarf, so, it could have been worse.
This is true. I've been doing that too. Hopefully the same episodes.
On today's episode, we are looking at Series 2, Episode 5, which was Queeg. And was this a particular favourite of yours, Kurt?
Queeg is a particular favourite of mine, yeah. If anything, just for the last 20 seconds. But no, it's I love Queeg. It's one of those ones early, which I would class as an early classic, I think.
Yeah.
You've gone through all the ones we've gone through so far, being fantastic and wonderful and great episodes, and critically watching them back and analysing them like we have. I've reevaluated them and absolutely loved them. But this one to me is the first real classic episode.
And how about you, Colin?
Yeah, love it. It's a great episode. It's a really, I think it's probably the first really good Holly episode.
Even though he's not really in it.
but it's all centred around him.
True.
So yeah.
I think for me this was one of the ones that I was really looking forward to, and after all the others had been so good, I was like, I hope Queeg isn't shit. And it wasn't, so I'm really glad. Should we get into it?
Sounds like a good plan.
Let's go for it.
So we've got the normal theme tune, and we've got Dave Lister painting the ship, and as always, at least in the first two series, we've got the Holly kind of introduction and recap. And this time he says that the biggest enemy is space craziness, but he's okay because he has his singing potatoes.
You know what? That didn't land as much as I remember, actually, surprisingly enough. It was like, okay, fine. But to be fair, it did make me think about quarantine straight away. And so that helped, Yes. I mean, obviously looking at it in the future rather than as it would have aired, but it did make me think about quarantine and what happens in that episode. So for that, I give it credit.
So it was like a future echo.
It was a very much episode. A future echo. Yeah.
I think for me, because the whole episode is about Holly not being very good at his job anymore, or allegedly not being very good at his job. The fact that he kind of implies that he's gone space crazy, and then it's about him having a reduced IQ. Never spotted that when I was younger, whereas now it seems to be a good fit rather than just a lol.
Yeah, it's a topical joke to fit with the rest of the...
Well, yeah, because he even says, he also says loneliness, doesn't he, in that section as well? So it goes back to what we've been saying the past two seasons about the theme of just being on your own and in this deep space and away from people and things. And Holly's probably had it worse than anyone because he's been alive for 3 million years.
That's true.
Yeah, he's not had the time off.
Not a single day off.
So it starts with the quarters, and Lister's doing a quiz for women, and he discovers that he is one foxy lady. Kat's listening to music, and Rimmer is playing drafts. Right,
so a couple of things on that. Number one, do you remember those magazines where you used to if you get mostly C's, you are this. If you get this, do you remember those? Because I do. I remember them being quite prevalent.
Well, they sort of still exist, but now they are BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
Well,
so
yeah.
I've done loads of random quizzes on BuzzFeed where half of the questions, like Lister was doing there, don't really apply to me when I'm reading it. You know, they're all based, American teenagers and stuff like that, and I have no idea
You're
what
not
the
American,
answer to some of.
Colin, are you not American teenager? Is this what you're telling me?
Not this week, no. So
only on Second Life.
Exactly. It's
Second Life. That's going to be a running theme, isn't it? We've talked about Second Life recently.
But it's just like, that was really relatable, just doing quizzes that have absolutely no relation to you when you're bored.
Yeah.
It's like...
I mean, I remember at the time, or maybe... No, so this was like late 80s, wasn't it? Or maybe early 90s. So maybe...
88.
Yeah. 1988,
right?
October 1988, yeah.
Okay, so that's actually 10 years before, actually. When I was in sixth form, one of the girls would buy Just 17, and we'd all do the same bloody quiz. Are you a good boyfriend or are you a good girlfriend? And all the questions were just as irrelevant as what Lister was doing. And I wonder whether that was kind of something that all the blokes did around that time, because it was...
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
There were simpler times, I think, weren't they?
Well, yeah, they definitely were. At 8 years old, they definitely were. Yeah, it's how the world's changed. So many years later. But the only thing that I would say as well, did you spot the CD case and the tape, which was an interesting one, because at this time, 1988, CDs were only just coming out, I think.
Yeah, they were pretty new.
Yeah, they'd been out a couple of years, but they weren't. It was not everybody had got them yet.
Yeah, because I remember getting Michael Jackson's Bad, and that came out in 87. I think the re-release came out in 88, had Leave Me Alone on it.
Yeah.
And that was my first CD, and that was around 88. So the fact that they've got this CD, but then they've got the CD box, and then Lister says about the tape's all screwed up, and I thought it's a bit jarring.
Yeah,
looking at it, because it's like if he had a tape, he's using a modern media at that point. But then they talk about the tape. I know it's just for gag, but it's just like it jumped out at me on this watch.
It did, and I thought that as well. But the other thing that I found sort of particularly jarring is whether it's a CD or a tape. It was physical media, which most people don't listen to now. But it's the same later on when you see Holly's monitor, and it's a massive CRT TV with a cathode ray.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's not that often that something's particularly dated when it comes to Red Dwarf, I don't think. Whereas, you're right, this was clearly very kind of late 80s, early 90s culture, and they hadn't really thought about how that would have moved on, which...
Yeah.
We've been praising Red Dwarf for its kind of like foresight and for how it's kind of timeless, but for this one, I think you're right.
Yeah.
So, being the ages that we are, did you have a mini disc player?
No, but I wanted one.
Well, I've got one. Right, I can send you one if you want. I've got one right behind me on my shelf unit as we speak.
We had a Data mini disc Porter studio in the sort of mid-90s. So it wasn't the same as your mini disc Walkman kind of thing, but it was a portable recording studio that recorded onto Data mini discs.
Oh, right.
So that was the closest I got to it.
The advert was brilliant. It was like a skateboarder who had this portable player, and he dropped his mini disc out of the player, rolled over it with his skateboard, but then could play it again. And I was like, we are living in the future.
Yeah, the music on it was Naked by Reef.
Yes, it was.
Oh, my God. Right, okay.
So
the reason why I asked that question is because when I started to go out, and my friend was a singer, and he used to go out solo, and they used to just every musician around the county were just obsessed with using them because of that reason, because they were pretty much indestructible. You could record your tracks onto them and flick between the tracks and things, and even to this day, some people still use them for that reason. And then I just remember the Gigabyte mini discs as well, where the Sony came out with the Gigabyte ones, or it might have not been Gigabyte.
A whole gigabyte.
1 gig.
OMG.
1 gig. And then it was right on the cusp of MP3, so mini discs just came out at just the wrong time. But they were good media for theatre productions and as I say, musical, like sort of soloists and stuff like that. But anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a diversion.
No, I enjoyed that.
Forgotten music formats is always good.
Absolutely.
Well, Colin, I mean, as a presenter of a music podcast, you are our resident music expert. So
exactly,
it's relevant conversation.
Absolutely.
Incidentally, it wasn't music he was listening to, by the way. It was Tess of the D'Urbervilles.
Yes, but it was all chewed up, so it was essentially sort of music concrete. Music concrete. I don't know. It's one of them things I've always read and never known how to pronounce it. I think it's music concrete.
What the hell is music concrete, Colin?
So it's basically like early industrial music made with sort of found sounds and stuff like that.
Like Stomp.
Stomp is kind of influenced by it, I would say, but I mean, more like the closest kind of thing is like Colin Stockhausen and people like that.
See, I've heard of Stomp, but I've not heard of Carlo and Stockhausen or whatever you just said.
I probably pronounced that wrong as well. Einstürzen and Neubauten.
And Kurt comes back in the room.
What?
If it's not
U2, I don't know it.
U2 only had 2 good songs.
Hey, don't get me started, Mark. I'm on you.
Right, Discotheque and the Batman one. What else is good?
Well, the Batman one's one of my favourite songs, actually.
It is a very good song.
Yeah, it is. There's loads of good songs, but we're not talking about U2. That's for another day.
To be fair, Mark, I was telling you the other day that their early records are very good.
Yeah, I wasn't sure I believed you. Anyway, Red Dwarf. Rimmer's very cross that he's losing to a Scudder, and he's cheating and waiting for the Scudder to go on duty.
Yeah, because then he automatically forfeits the game.
Yeah, and that's very Rimmer, and they really. I feel like they just got the characters and their nuances perfect. Remember, this is only like episode 11. So they've only done 11 episodes, and they've just got each character so bang on so quickly. Some American TV shows take 3 seasons of 22 episodes to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I particularly like that Rimmer scene as well, because it's a testament to him being intelligent as well, which is not something that we've really seen before. The hiding of the discs. The switch of discs, but I'd probably take that back. But it does showcase that he has got a manipulation mind and is able to like go right. Well, I can win by just by nefarious ways and circumstances.
Yeah. It's sneaky, and it's like the kind of person that thinks like that will win like that, even if they're not particularly bright. So he's a lot sneakier and a lot more kind of underhand, but it works.
Yeah.
Holly appears, and he says that he's forgotten what he was going to say, and then a meteor hits, and he says, "Oh yeah, a meteor's going to hit." And Rimmer gets very cross and accuses him of senility.
Yeah.
Okay. So, did a meteor hit the ship or not? Is my question.
Ooh.
Is it part of the ruse?
Is it part of the ruse? Is it the beginning of the part of the ruse?
I think a meteor did hit the ship because there was a fair bit of destruction that they had to go and fix.
Yeah.
Which was quite dangerous. I don't think he would have endangered Lister that much, just for, Jape of the Century.
I think the reality is somewhere in between the two truths, the one that he deliberately did this from the start and then he took an opportunity. I think he kind of, maybe there was, how can I put it? Bugger. Sorry, Kurt.
That's all right. Oh, man.
So yeah, I think the meteor did hit, but then he used it as an opportunity rather than planning it. But I think that maybe him saying he's got an IQ of 6,000 and Queeg saying he's got an IQ of 6, the reality is he has gone a little bit wonky, but not as wonky as he was suggesting. I think he's probably kind of somewhere in between the two. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's that could be that's a fair assessment, I think.
So the damage report machine is down, but Holly does know where it has hit. So the boys from the Dwarf, off they go. They're walking through the corridors, nothing there. Rimmer's legs go AWOL, which is my kind of humour, and I laughed a lot.
It's another nice technical bit as well, with the lining up the split screen that they would have had to do at the time, which obviously these days they could do really, really easily, but would have taken sort of a lot of, precision from Chris Barry to make sure he was standing in exactly the right place.
Yeah, I know that obviously over the summer that I've been going through the 3 Million Years documentary, and there's a ever so slightly very quick clip of that blue screen being up on that scene on the left hand side. It's only there for literally half a second. It's not focused on it at all.
Yeah.
But obviously when you see the split across the TV and stuff like that, so if you're looking for the lines, you can find them. But it was nice seeing that little blue screen there, just to just as the thing, because they did it on the Mayor of Warsaw as well. They showed that split screen and how they did that. But it's all kind of like, just like, as I say, it wasn't focusing particularly on it. It was just a very quick behind the scenes snippet.
Yeah, there's also in that bit, you will have probably talked about it in a previous episode that I've not heard yet, but all the listeners will have, where Holly's in his mobile mode where he's on a trolley. And I love that bit because it reminds me of, when you're at school and they wheeled the TV trolley in, and it was always the best day at school.
Well, he's on his trolley in a bit, isn't he?
Yeah.
But I love how, I don't think they ever did that with female Holly. I think they only ever did it with normal Holly.
They didn't need to because they'd got Crichton then. So she used to sometimes appear in his little screen thingy on his chest.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she does, doesn't she? On backwards, she does.
Yeah.
That's a shame, really. I think the little kind of trolley Holly was brilliant.
Trolley Holly. And the name of this episode is called Trolley Holly.
That is now the official name of
Definitely.
any time that Holly is on his trolley from now on.
As opposed to office trolley.
Yes, quite. So, Rimmer starts repeating everyone. Rimmer glitches and turns into the ship psychiatry. Brilliant impressionist work by Chris Barry. They get to the hologram suite, and Rimmer is repeating everyone and not having a good day, really.
Yeah, Chris Barry's impressions in that bit, absolutely fantastic. And you can tell it must be just what he was doing when they were sitting around in between takes. And he was just, doing impressions of half the cast and crew. And then they went, right, we're going to put that in an episode. And it works really, really well.
It does. It works fantastically well. But I think, and forgive me because I've only watched this the once. I've had a tough week. But I'm pretty sure that he doesn't repeat Holly's line exactly at the beginning. Everyone else's he does, but I don't think he does on the very beginning. First one, I might be in my mind. I might be forgetting that.
Oh, did you spot a smeg up?
I might have spotted a smeg up. Or it might be my smeg up because I just imagined it. But I'm pretty sure that the first line that he says when he repeats Holly isn't word for word exactly what Holly actually said.
Well, I didn't spot it, but it doesn't mean it wasn't there.
It's disgraceful. I can no longer be a fan. I'm going to have to stop doing this.
I know that these inconsistencies of this TV show is just sending me for a loop. Like, it's horrible TV show. Hate it. Can't get anything right.
No.
Sorry, Mark. Sorry.
So they're back in the control room, and Kat and Rimmer are giving Holly a hard time after the damage and after Rimmer went wonky. Suddenly, an unknown computer face appears. And it is Queeg. He's the backup.
Yes.
Mr. defends Holly, saying he's got an IQ of 6,000. And Queeg says it's not 6,000, it's 6. And that he has all his answers from the Junior Encyclopedia. And they've been going round in circles.
Junior Colour Encyclopedia of Space.
Yes. And, Holly's retired and Queeg's in charge.
Did we not get the explosion scene before that, though? Or was that later?
We did. But
yeah, that was in the hologram suite, wasn't it? Sorry, I missed that.
Yes. Yeah, because that's that in itself. They mention it in the 3 million years. I know it's been mentioned before as well, that the little trampoline that he uses to jump over.
Yeah.
And the explosion's quite pretty big. And and it's got one of the best lines of Holly's career is when he says, "Or is it the yellow cable?"
Yeah.
Just the way, again, it's just held, he's waiting for the audience to like just calm themselves down after a little bit, and it's like, oh, did he mention the yellow cable? And I just love the way that's played, that whole cable scene, because the amount of unnervingness, the very kind of like sort of ramping up of tension, the fact that you hit the sound designs, you're hearing that, and it's getting louder and louder, and higher pitched, and you're starting to worry for them all, and it's getting worse, and obviously Lister's he's like saying, following the instructions, and then you've got Rimmer doing what he needs to do, and then finally you get that deadpan line. It just fits perfectly.
As Lister staggers back up, there's smoke coming out of his hat, which is a nice little visual detail that I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
I think with this scene, it's not just that it's so well written, it's the fact that Norman Lovett is clearly made for this part, and his delivery and his voice, everything about it has melded perfectly at this point. And it's just so fucking sad that no disrespect to Hattie Hayes, she was also brilliant, but it's so sad that he leaves after only 2 series. And do either of you know why?
Yes. I do, but we'll talk about that in the next one. Because that's his last episode.
Tune in next week, folks, where we'll discuss what Mark said in this episode.
That's almost like a continuation of the plot.
Cliffhangers.
We're going into the 20th century with like storytelling over multiple episodes. What's going on here?
Mad.
So Queeg's appeared.
He has.
So
Queeg's appeared. Oh, by the way, and the shuttle was late, you see. The shuttle was late. Which it supposedly was after somebody as well, which I quite liked. I like the fact that they've...
It was one of the crew, but I can't remember which one.
I want to say it's Harold, but I'm not entirely sure it was him or not.
Yeah. No, I can't remember.
So can I ask a random question here? Are either of you into the football?
No.
The football, the ball that you kick around.
I'm aware of it as a thing that the heterosexuals tend to like.
Not all heterosexuals.
Yes, the general heterosexual populace.
Of which I am one of them who supports the current Premier League champions.
Right,
so yes.
So I don't even know who that is. I'm quite proud of that.
Chelsea?
It's Liverpool.
Oh, is it Liverpool?
Yes, my family are from Liverpool.
Okay. So
it's all north.
Obviously, I have a football team because, as a British man, you have to. And I just went for the one about where I'm from. So Wolverhampton Wanderers, woo. Although Wolverhampton technically is apparently owned by China now. I don't know. Is that something? Or have I made that up?
I don't know.
No, I don't know, actually. I don't know. But they're doing all right, Wolves. They're doing all right. Anyway.
Are they owned by China or Saudi or something like that?
I thought Wolves were owned by Elton John.
No, Wolves used to be owned by a bloke called Jack Haywood, but he died.
No.
Anyway, so yeah. the reason we're talking about the kickball is what's wrong with Tottenham Hotspur? Why did they particularly pick on Tottenham Hotspur to replace the word shit?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm guessing that depending on where, because Holly's got a southern kind of London accent, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So whether or not he's a fan of the Arsenal or the Chelsea, then you're talking London rivalries.
Quite possible.
That makes sense.
So the fact that he's saying this is a whole load of Tottenham Hotspur, I think is. I think it may be to do with that, potentially.
So in theory, if they'd got a Mancunian actor, they might have had him a whole load of City or a whole load of United instead of a whole load of Hot.
Yeah, and I think Tottenham Hotspur just works, doesn't it? Because of the natural name of it, and the way it's the circadian rhythm of the name.
So they're not particularly disliked by everybody, just the other London teams. It's not like they're the ones that, I don't know, injured lots of people or something.
No, they're not like... Well, Leeds were renowned when in the 70s for being a really rock-hard, like, hard team. Or you've got likes of Millwall, who had quite a big hooligan kind of aspect to them. So, but no, Tottenham, not that I'm aware of anyway. I've never seen Tottenham as a particularly a team that you would love to hate. No,
I was just fascinated because obviously it's a culture I'm just not getting at all. So the joke didn't really hit with me. I wondered if it was something that was absolutely fucking hilarious to fans of the kickball.
He's definitely a football fan. I don't know which team, but I've just done some Googling to try and find out. And in the mid-70s, Norman Lovett wrote a book called the Football Programme Collector's Handbook, including price guide.
Gosh.
Okay.
So that's a fact I didn't know before.
So it appears like we've deduced that it's just a London thing. He's from London and supports one of the other ones, probably.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Yeah. Either that or Tottenham Hotspur is just a wonderful couple of words that work quite well in the rhythm of what he's saying.
It also could be Rob Grant or Doug Naylor that don't like Tottenham Hotspur.
Are they Londoners?
Rob Grant is from Manchester, but I think they were living in London at the time.
Huh.
And anyway. Doug Naylor doesn't do any of the interviewee type stuff, so I haven't got a clue.
So sorry for that massive tangent, but should we get back to the show?
Yeah, because
they're in the quarters.
Shit.
Football is shit, I agree. They're in the quarters, and Queeg says...
Quarterfinals?
We've got him started.
Are we in the quarterfinals? Sorry. We'll stop talking about football. I apologise.
Brilliant.
What does FA stand for?
Fuck all.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So it doesn't have a thing?
No, Football Association.
Oh, that makes sense. The Football Association Cup. Yeah, right.
Right. So Queeg's appeared.
Yes, Queeg's appeared, and he says that they've changed course.
Are we watching like an episode which just repeats after that?
Rimmer is pleased.
So Queeg appeared.
I shouldn't have asked about the fucking football.
No, you shouldn't.
Anyway, Queeg says that they've changed course, and Rimmer is pleased with the improvements that have been made to the ship. Lister is quite sad because he was fond of Holly, and he starts to wind up a Rimmer, and they're talking about kind of computer sentience, and I really liked how they didn't go too far into it, but they went, here is a big-time sci-fi trope that we're addressing here. We are going to talk about whether or not it was cruel to do this to a non... not non-sentient,
He's definitely sentient.
Yeah, so non-organic. There we go, non-organic life form.
Yeah, and it's interesting how they touch upon that with, although it's a great little joke with having shoes having soul. And there's no reason, there's no like accident that they've put that joke in there with asking the very question which Star Trek did a lot about whether or not, an artificial life form does have a soul or not. So it's, and I know they don't touch upon it so much, but it's just like, it's in and around the background of that general conversation.
Yeah. And see, I don't particularly like the term soul because I don't believe in the soul. So I can't think of an alternative way to phrase it.
Yeah, but it wouldn't really work for the sole of your foot, though, would it?
No.
Yeah.
Because if you don't believe in the soul, it means you don't believe you've got a foot.
I do believe I've got a foot. I've got 2 of those.
Have we got a ball?
I've got 2 of those as well. What would you have done if I'd only got 1 and it was a really embarrassing thing that I was really upset about?
Are you Hitler?
I'm not fucking Hitler, for God's sake.
Fuck all.
There's more than one person who's only got 1 ball.
Yeah, but the famous one's Hitler.
Well, the famous one is Hitler. Slept with a guy with 1
I don't think that's true.
Have you ever seen a cock with one ball?
I've not looked at that closely, to be honest.
They
I
look
don't think so.
Weird. They work.
Okay,
though.
fair enough. Right, okay.
Anyway, where the bloody hell did we get there? Right, sorry.
Oh, welcome to Shipwrecked Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast that sometimes talks about other things.
I wasn't going to do sex talk today. I was going to be good. The last time we had Colin on, we talked about having sex with ourselves, and I was going to try and behave. And you started talking to me about balls, and I got excited.
I'm fairly sure that's going to come up next episode.
Well, it depends on what depends what a worm does, doesn't it? Really.
So
right,
Queeg's turned up.
Queeg turned up, and there's a 6 a.m. alarm, and Rimmer bolts out of bed, and Rimmer explains to Queeg that he had an agreement.
He and Holly had an understanding.
Yeah, an agreement, an understanding that 6 a.m. means 10, and Queeg basically tells him balls. And the alarm keeps going off, and eventually he takes control of Rimmer and makes him exercise.
Yes.
Now, this is a question I was going to ask, because that very thing of the fact that he's taken control over his body, and, you know, sci-fi tropes take on this quite a lot, with, like, say, like of Blade Runner, for example. I don't know if you've seen Blade Runner, but...
I've seen like 6 or 8 versions of fucking Blade Runner.
I was going to say, it depends which cut, yeah.
Yeah. And the two, and 2049 as well, remember. But yeah, this idea that, you know, that Rimmer's got no control over his life at that point. You know, he's literally been taken over. It's almost like the company owns him.
Yeah.
And that's something that comes up again and again in sci-fi tropes. Even like sort of, I was on a podcast recently. It was surprise, I was on a podcast.
On a podcast,
exactly. Talking about the Truman Show, and, you know, the fact that Truman was a company product. He was like born within the universe in which he lives. But does that make him where does that lie? And the fact that when in the Truman Show, they're trying to create their very first on-air conception, and that baby would have been the owner of that company. And this is something that bothers me in a lot of ways. But it's interesting how different people approach it within the sci-fi world of, you know, this kind of company ownership of people.
Yeah, it's like slaves and drones and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Not quite Silent Green as people, but yeah.
But again, is Rimmer human? He isn't organic. So again, it's the morals of whether or not it's the same to do this to hologram Rimmer as it would be to do to original organic Rimmer. Is there a difference? And you never really think this deep when you're watching Red Dwarf normally, but they put in so many really quite hard sci-fi things that can make you think. But yeah, he falls asleep while he's having a run, and it's funny. And
there's also the bit where he's forcing him to do sit-ups just before that. I think it's just before that. And he's actually doing some fairly hardcore... I couldn't do that amount of sit-ups the way he was doing them. And it really wouldn't surprise me if... you know, other members of the cast had have been deliberately messing stuff up so that Chris had to keep retaking that bit.
yeah, you can imagine it, can.
Yeah, and then that's the thing. I think we touched on it earlier about how they've played to Chris Barry's strengths. They clearly have in this episode. And I think there's maybe real friendships formed and real kind of knowledge of each other's strengths and abilities that has influence what the writers write here.
Yeah.
And I think that's great.
Yeah, definitely. It's why it stood the test of time so much. It's the fact that there's so many really brilliant ideas in it, as well as it being incredibly funny and still funny now.
As Rimmer has fainted and he's running, he goes past the cat who can't make the food machine work.
Yeah.
And so eventually Lister asks about the machines, and Queeg says, you have to work to make the machines work. So, cut to the corridors with Lister and the cat cleaning the floor. And they basically have to work all day, and Holly arrives on the Holly trolley, and he's in a flat cap as the new night watchman.
Yep.
And don't forget the scarf.
Yeah, he's got a scarf as well. It's a lovely little touch. And they basically ask him to help. And Holly points out that, well, you didn't defend me, did you?
Yeah.
And so they have this kind of like back and forth where he says, I want to prove it. Oh, go on then, prove it. Oh, you want me to prove it, etc., etc. But eventually they get to ask him a question, and he brings up this junior encyclopedia up in front of him on the screen. And regardless of the fact that they think he's using the fucking encyclopedia, they both want him back.
Yeah. Well, you would, wouldn't you? It's Holly. He's
really
lovely.
Would. I mean, the guy who plays Queeg is much more attractive than Holly, but, you know, I'd still want Holly.
I'm glad that you mentioned him. We need to talk about Charles Organs.
Do I know him other than as Queeg?
You will have seen a film that he's in, but you wouldn't have recognised that it's him.
Go on.
He's been in various other bit part of TV things where he was in an episode of Blake's 7, and before this he was most well known for a Baby Sham advert in the mid-80s.
Oh, he's the deep voice guy on the Baby Sham ad.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Did you not see that tweet I put on the other day, Mark?
Yeah, and I didn't clock what the bloody hell you were doing it for.
Well, rewatch it. Go back to that tweet and watch it when we finish here.
We'll have to retweet it out from the Shipwrecked account when the episode goes out. But so he is mainly a choreographer and a dance teacher. He's Danny John Jules' mentor, and was for I'm just going to re-say that because I just knocked my microphone over with gesticulating hands.
Were you doing a bit of a dancer?
I was, yeah. No, so he was Danny John Jules' mentor previously. So it was actually him that brought him to the attention of Grant and Naylor when they were sorting out the casting and everything. He choreographed a bit of dancing that we will see in a later episode.
I wonder which one that is.
Next week. And
which was filmed before so that we won't talk about that actual thing, but that was filmed before this in production.
Yes, it was.
Parallel Universe was actually filmed before Queeg.
Yeah. So he was also his biggest choreography job was Labyrinth. So he did
Dance.
He did the choreography for Dance Magic Dance and the fireys, the red dudes that chuck their heads around and stuff. And he's one of the fireys, and another one of the fireys is Danny John Jules, which I didn't know until yesterday.
Good grief!
I need to fact check this.
Good grief! Brilliant. I mean, he was brilliant anyway, but wow, I love Labyrinth.
He's now the chair of dance at Duke Ellington School of Arts in Washington, D.C.
Right, so what's his name?
Charles Organs. Augins.
Right, because the link, this is my link with you, is that Gates McFadden also choreographed on Labyrinth. Gates McFadden is Dr. Beverly Crusher on Star Trek The Next Generation. Because she's a dancer as well, and she choreographed Labyrinth, and Labyrinth is one of my favourite films. So,
right.
But yeah,
because Charles Organs only did the Fireys bit and Dance Magic Dance, so the other bits would have been Beverly Crusher.
Yeah.
To be fair, I would have never known Beverly Crusher's real name, so yeah, we can just call her Bev.
Yeah,
Beverly Crusher.
I've already forgotten it because I think the last time I watched Star Trek, she's in The Next Generation, isn't she?
She is.
Correct.
See, that's probably the extent of my Star Trek knowledge.
She's in
and
a
now I'm going to get banned from the network
thing with Jean-Luc.
Right.
And this comes out at the perfect time to say I'm on a Star Trek Picard podcast, and you can find it at Jean-Luc Podard.
Does he ever bonker?
You what?
Does he ever bonker?
No. There's a scene. There's a scene where there's the body's been taken over, and she comes onto him. And there's a scene where later on in the season where they end up together, captured, and there's a bit of like to and fro in, but no, they never get to that point.
Shatner would have.
Shatner totally would have.
Yeah.
So would Riker. Where was she in Picard, by the way?
She might be coming in next season.
Okay. Because she's not mentioned at all. Neither's Wesley. I would love to see what's his face, funny guy who played Wesley. Will Wheaton. I would love to see Wesley.
Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton. No, the in the book, the Star Trek Picard book with Una McCormack. I'm talking about Make It So now, which Tony discussed with Una McCormack, and she's been on the podcast as well. That Beverly is head of, like, I think she's Starfleet Medical, and she speaks to Picard. So in the universe, as we speak in the books, that she is still speaking to him, and as I say, may well appear. And Worf is captain of the Enterprise. So there you go. That's the official line at the moment until they decide to change it.
Yeah, Star Wars is better though. That's the official line.
We can all agree that Red Dwarf is the best. Moving on.
Yeah, that's
Red
fair.
Dwarf is the best. Yeah.
So they're back in the quarters, and Lister gets a pea on toast for dinner because he hasn't worked very well, and he loses his pea and gets very upset.
That's my pea.
It was my pea. I earned it.
I don't care where it is. It landed in your sock basket. I'll just have the toast. Even Lister has limits, which I quite liked in that episode.
And so they're talking about how they feel bad for not sticking up for Holly, and Rimmer says he's had no friends ever, and goes into detail about his Space Scout friend Porky Roebuck, who on a camp betrayed him and helped the others in an attempt to cook him.
Yes. Which is excellent. I'm all for a bit of cannibalism.
There's a really horrible line that I just can't get on board with, but I guess for some people it must resonate. And Rimmer says friends are only friends when it suits them. And I was like, ow! Right in the feels.
That is an interesting line, though. It is interesting.
Yeah. I can see why Rimmer, being the sort of damaged individual he is, would think that, which is really sad. But he's brought it on himself.
Perhaps there are people out there that genuinely feel like that about their friends, and it's so bleak.
Yeah, there's definitely some people that think that.
Yeah.
You know.
Glad I don't.
I mean, I need you guys right now to do a podcast, you know?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, mate.
It's all right. Me well.
So there was a line in there that I didn't get. Plinkle blip blap blop blap, or whatever it was.
Porky Pinkle. Swimming. I don't know either. Was that
a play on dib 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 dob dob dob, do you think?
Yes, he was basically saying that he was in the Space Scouts, and I think that that's their sort of whatever dib 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 dob 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 was, because when I was in the Scouts, that never came up. So
no. Would you like to know what dib 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 dob 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 stands for? Because they're both actually acronyms.
Amazing. Go on then.
So I'm a Scout leader, and I actually looked this up. It's just from the Cubs. If you remember at Cubs, you would circle around Arcala, and you would all say, "I will do my best." So dib 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 is almost always spelt wrong. It should be dib 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 spelt DYB DYB DYB.
Do your best, do you? Of course it is.
And then dob 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 is do our best, do our best, do our best. So it's a call and response that went out of fashion donkeys years ago, way before our childhoods, but that was where it actually comes from. So there you go.
I was in the Cubs. And I was in the Scouts. But our Scouts mainly just did sort of shooting and archery and never did any badges, and used to generally get told off by the district scout leader thingy because we were cool.
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't in any. But when you were saying that dib dib dib, do your best, all that entered my head was Mr. Burns on The Simpsons singing "See My Vest."
Good. I mean, I do love The Simpsons, but we definitely shouldn't podcast about it.
No,
there's enough already.
Is there a lot of Simpsons podcasts, is there?
There's a fair few, yeah.
Right. And then he points out that even Lister has been seeing his inflatable sex doll, which made me laugh because inflatable sex doll.
It's a good use of alliteration, isn't it? As well, inflatable Ingrid.
There's polythene pal.
It's polythene pal. Yeah. I didn't think of that either. Yeah, it's alliteration as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's polythene pal. Yeah, IP.
But it's genuinely very sad, this scene, because it's probably true about Rimmer that he's never had a real friend, and he hasn't worked out that he's got one now.
Yeah, because Lister they're the kind of friends that would not admit they were friends, but they bloody are.
Yeah. And they're both coming at it from different. I know we've talked about this before, but they're both coming from different backgrounds. But at the same time, Lister's a humanist at the end of the day, isn't he? Really? Yeah. You know, because he's obviously got that much empathy with him, within him, that he knows the fact that he's been bullied this much, because he's obviously Rimmer is obviously damaged goods. You know, everything that he said overall, and there's no way Lister's got a heart. He wouldn't. You know, without physically telling him, in the background, you'd be thinking, you know, what a unlucky life this bastard's had. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it's just not right, and you know, and Lister wouldn't be able to let that lie. I don't think.
No, I agree.
So they end up back in the control room, and Queeg is telling off Lister and the cat for shirking, and he also shouts at Rimmer for not being very bright. So the Holly trolley appears, and there's a song, right? There's a song, and it's a song about facing the enemy. I replayed this 4 times to Shazam it, and Shazam didn't know what it was. So I'm thinking they created this song for the show itself, unless either of you have got any better ideas.
It was Howard Goodall sang it, but it was... It's from High Noon, or it's one of those old spaghetti western movies.
Right.
So why didn't Shazam get on with it?
Perhaps because it was a cover that's never been commercially released anywhere else. It was probably different enough.
I have problems with Shazam full stop. I try and Shazam quite a lot of things and they don't pick it up. And I know for a fact it's a certain song.
I love Shazam. Because I'm not very music-y anymore. If I hear a good song, I ain't never going to know what it is. So I use Shazam lots. But I was very disappointed. Shazam doesn't normally let me down. So do you think this cover version was specifically for the show, or it was a not very well-known cover version?
Yeah, it was a movie reference, which this episode is full of. Because the whole plot is based on the Caine Mutiny, which is where the character name Queeg comes from. So there's Lieutenant Commander Philip Francis Queeg from Caine Mutiny, which was a movie. I think it was an Oscar-winning movie that Humphrey Bogart was the star of, but it was a book by Herman Wouk. And it came out in 1951. But yeah, there's High Noon reference. There is a 2001 Space Odyssey reference when in a few minutes' time where Holly gets switched off. And
Compared to me boy.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
that was on Sky Movies the other night, actually.
That's a great film, isn't it? Yeah. So what Holly does enter the control room, and he says he wants his ship back, and then challenges Queeg to a game, and the winner will get Red Dwarf, the loser gets deleted. Queeg chooses chess, and Holly attempts to pick any other game other than chess.
This has got that Everybody's Dead Dave kind of vibe to it, hasn't it? It's just like anything. No, chess. Noughts and crosses comes at the end, doesn't it? But it's like noughts and crosses. No.
And what I loved about this is when they're playing chess, Holly calls the knight horsey,
Horsey to King Bish 3.
And prawns as well.
Prawns,
prawns.
Yeah. It's brilliant. One of my favourite, and this is actually one of my favourite moments in the show's history, is just when the cat goes, I think I've worked it out, and he's telling him what to do, and it's the way that Holly looks at him and just nods at him. It's like, yeah, you really are stupid.
Every time you make a move, he makes a move.
Thanks, Kat. Thanks.
So yes, they have an intense game of chess, and unsurprisingly, Queeg wins.
Yes. Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. Exactly right. So it cuts to the quarters, and all three of the main cast are gutted, and Holly comes in to say goodbye. He wishes them all well, and he kind of shows them that he knows them all pretty well, actually, and asks them to raise a glass to him. It's all very kind of pathos, and then finishes on a song, and it feels genuinely sad when he's erased.
Yeah. The music and the actual monologue, the way that it's both blended together, that kind of wispy, the music that's playing in the background just really helped to add that kind of. You're talking about film references going back to the 50s and stuff like that. It's definitely got that kind of, I want to say Gone with the Wind kind of thing, but that's not what I'm thinking about. But yeah, but that kind of, because they use that quite a bit, that old style kind of this is the final goodbye kind of thing. And it works really well here. And it's a nice juxtaposition with a sci-fi show doing something that's really serious at this point, because at the end of the day, you're talking about AI that's been eliminated, being killed effectively, the fact that the fact that you've got this juxtaposition of this wispy kind of goodbye music, we'll see you again sometime kind of thing.
Yeah, you almost forget how well they do scenes like this because it's so funny, and then you take a step back and it hits you right in the feels. I just fucking love Red Dwarf.
It's good, isn't it? We should do a podcast about it.
We should.
Oh, we do. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll say it again, 26 minutes changed the world. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Queeg comes on screen, and I'm not going to do an offensive impression. He says, "Okay, suckers, there's only one thing I've got to say to you. What's happening, dudes?" And I'll take the mickey out of Norman Lovett. But, and it was, it was a joke. And we nearly got through an episode. We nearly got through an episode where there isn't a quotable dwarf. But of course, April, May, June, July, and August fool, I will say every time someone's being stupid.
Yes.
Yeah. And what fascinates me about this scene is that they've got to just before the monologue, and they were really struggling about how they were going to get out of this mess. The episode. And they actually went to the pub and started talking about it, and then it only just dawned on them to make it an April Fool's joke, which is really fascinating.
They'd got 80% of the script of the episode written before they decided that it'd be that at all. So, considering the whole thing revolves around the fact that it could have been entirely different. Yeah.
Do you think they knew that Norman Lovett was leaving at this point?
I think they
well, they will have, because this was filmed last.
Yeah, and I think the staff, the sort of higher ups, may have known more than he did.
Oh,
that's for next week.
No shit, right? Because I doubt it was ever that they would have kept Queeg forever, because he's kind of restricting.
Yeah, no, that was never the plan, to keep Queeg on. But I think certain people, if they didn't know outright, at least probably had a suspicion that Norman wouldn't be around for much longer.
Right.
But thankfully he comes back loads later, so that's all good.
Yeah.
So basically the moral of the story is appreciate what you fucking got.
Yes, because basically he's awesome.
I mean, as like a metaphor, really. But yes, Norman Lovett is awesome. But as a metaphor, I think, particularly as we're recording in the middle of kind of COVID-19 changing the world, I've been thinking a lot like this recently, you know, that I had a wonderful, wonderful life that I took for granted, and now with all these restrictions in the way, I really appreciate what I had.
Yeah. You've got more podcasts since that, though.
That's true. Can COVID be an April, May, June, July and August fool, and we can get back to having nice lives again now, please?
Oh, what was it?
Boris come on the telly. Boris comes on the telly.
I saw something the other day.
June, July and August fool.
He's more than April, May, June, July and August fool, Boris.
Well, true.
Well, I saw something the other night, and I'm not sure. Obviously, I don't know you that well, but Darren Brown was on Channel 4 the other night doing another special. I don't know if you saw it.
I didn't, but I have a massive crush on Darren Brown, so I will be watching that soon.
Okay.
But now, do you have legitimately, or has he hypnotised you to have a massive crush on him at some point?
Honestly, don't care.
I mean, he has come up in the podcast before, because I think we were talking about books, and I've got the Darren Brown Trick of the Mind book. But I'll have to admit though, the actual trick, the live trick, was a bit too obvious because I know him too well. That I kind of clocked on to what he was doing. So as soon as the end game came up, it was like, I know exactly what's going to go on here, but I know what to look for. And it is still impressive. Don't get me wrong, I couldn't do it. But there was tweets going on during the show about, you know, various different things. And people was like turning around saying, is this when Darren Brown turns around to say he's hypnotised the world? it's all just a joke. And that's it, we can go back to normal in September.
Oh, wouldn't that be good?
It would. Darren Brown changed the world.
I'm liking working from home, though. I don't want to go back.
Yeah. I still go to work and there's nobody there. So,
I mean, that might be all right. I'd just rather not have the commuting.
No, yeah.
Yeah, seems legit.
For those people who do commute to listen to the podcast, though, it's always a good thing, because people listen to podcasts on commutes. So
that is true. That is true. Thank you for listening on your commute if you have one. Thank you for listening while you're doing the housework if you don't have one. Or
going for random walks, or just however you're listening. It's all good. If you are trapped in deep space and this is 3 million years in the future and somehow you found an archive of these, that's cool.
On a CD or tape that's mangled.
Then, or a mini disc.
Oh, good. Or a mini disc, yeah.
It'd probably be a mini disc, really, because that would have survived.
Yeah.
Potential.
I still want to say something about the Dave shows. I'm not going to, but we'll carry on.
No spoilers.
I know.
So before we do goodbyes, do either of you have anything else that you want to talk about Queeg that we have missed?
I've got a couple of facts.
Go on then. Hit me with your facts.
So this was quite a significant episode for two reasons. It's the episode that started off the fan club. So after watching this episode was when the people that started the fan club finally went, yeah, we really need to start a fan club for this, and actually properly started it up, which then lasted for absolutely ages. And it's also the episode that the producers at Universal saw and decided that, they needed to do Red Dwarf USA. Oh. So thankfully they didn't manage it after the pilots that we've talked about previously. But
if you want to listen to two unfortunate people who had to actually watch, make notes, and analyse the Red Dwarf USA stuff, Carl and I had a go at that, and they're not good.
Yeah. I was strangely absent for that.
You were strangely absent from the RPG episode as well, Kurt.
I don't know why these things keep happening to me. I keep wandering off looking for planets with helium-7, and that's a quote that you won't get, Mark. Sorry.
No, I don't get it.
It's all good. It's a Dave episode again. I apologise.
Oh, no spoilers.
We'll know about it one day.
You will know about it one day. It was in the documentary, so people listening to the documentary, it was on there, so don't worry.
I haven't watched the documentary, and I haven't listened to your episodes on the documentary.
Well, that's good. That's what I mean. It's good that you're not doing that, because there isn't that much, but it's definitely will spoil some things for you. So it's definitely best to leave them alone and watch them at the end of this journey.
Yes. That's what I've done too.
So, any last thoughts on Queeg?
It's a bloody good episode.
Really is.
And Charles Organs is utterly fantastic in it. He's really believable as the character. Yeah. And it's all good. There's some, like I said at the start, even though Holly isn't in a lot of the episode, it's a Holly episode more than anything else, I think. And it showcases how good Norman Lovett is. Every time he's in it, Norman is, utterly fantastic. Hattie Hayridge is as well when she replaces him. They got a good replacement with her, as we'll talk about next week. Yeah. It's good. Watch it if you haven't already. Although it's a bit weird if you're listening to an entire podcast on it and you haven't already watched it. I would imagine that most of our listeners have already seen all of the classic Red Dwarf episodes, at least.
Anyway, Queeg's in it. I've got a couple of things, actually. They mentioned 14 months in deep space, so it gives us a time frame of how long they've been together now. So they've been together for 14 months.
Was that the amount of time that had happened since Series 1 and Series 2 aired?
I don't know, because they're saying that they've been circling around in Red Dwarf. He says that they've been circling around in Red Dwarf for 14 months when they're meant to be going back to Earth.
Yeah. So that would seem logical with, the gap in between the series happened in real time, but nothing interesting happened during that time.
Yeah. And do you think the geography teacher, Miss Foster, had a good night? She didn't think men were better than machines. And that's it. That's all I've got to say, really. I think that's the things I need to say.
Right, Colin. Where can people find you on the internet?
So, I'm on two other We Made This podcasts. We Dig Music, which is me, my mate Ian, and my friend Tracy talking about music, obviously. We're on a bit of a break at the moment, as we will have possibly announced by now when this episode comes out, but we'll be back at Christmas. And then Free With This Month's Issue is my other one, which is still going at the moment, monthly. And that is where we listen to a different free CD from an old music magazine each month with a different guest. And that both of them you can find on wedigpodcasts.com or by searching for either of them in your podcast things. On Twitter, at This Month's Issue and at wedigmusicpcast. And then various Instagrammy things. Just have a look, you'll find them.
What about you, Kurt?
You can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. That's RMULDRAKE. That's a deep dive for those X-Files fans, which is also what I'm on, the X-Cast, the X_cast. You can find me. I'm now in charge of season 6 onwards with Carl Sweeney and Sarah Blair. And that will be coming back very shortly, actually, when this airs. The season 6 we're covering. So we covered the Fight the Future Minute, which is the Fight the Future film from 1998, rather than 1988, which was what we're talking about here, where we covered the film minute by minute. So every single minute of the film we covered, with a host of Patreons and guests and hosts and people who have been on the X-Cast. So we are moving into season 6. That's where I'm going next. I'm also covering season 3 of Millennium at the moment on my podcast, The Time Is Now. And you can find that at The Time Is Now pod. And that's on the show Millennium, which is a TV show starring Lance Henriksen, who of Alien fame. And he was in that show, and it was all about the coming apocalypse. And we're in season 3 of that. So those are the best places at the moment hopefully we'll have some Star Trek Picard news, as I mentioned before, but I've already mentioned where you can find me with that, which is at Jean-Luc Podard, and that's the Make It So podcast.
And I did mean to mention earlier when you said that despite me not being a Star Trek fan, Jean-Luc Podard is probably one of the best Twitter names I have ever heard.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
I can't take that. It's Tony's bag. That Tony was the one that nicknamed that. So it's a wonderful Twitter handle. I love it.
It is.
As for me, you can find me at Mark Adams HC on Twitter and Instagram, although I don't really like Instagram. It's like Twitter on hard mode. I do. Am I wrong?
It's easy. It's just pictures and stuff. You don't have to read.
No, I don't get filters. I don't like it. I don't like it. Don't get it. And I've got it because everyone told me I should have it. Anyway, and I'm on 4 podcasts, 3 of which are on the We Made This Podcast network. Pull or Pass, which is a weekly comic book show. You can find that at Pull or Pass on Twitter. Life's Milestones, which is linked to my job as a humanist celebrant, where I have a different guest once a fortnight to talk about, well, their life's milestones, birth, weddings, and funerals. And I'm also on Right in the Childhood, which is a podcast about me and my mate Fraser. I'm tail end of Generation X, he's tail end of Millennial, and we kind of look at each other's cherished telly and decide whether it's actually dead good or shit. And we take it in turns every month with who gets to pick. And that's a relatively new one, so do check that out because we're having the best time doing that. That's RITC Pod on Twitter. And naughty me, I'm also on another podcast outside the network called Super Tat Film Club, which basically looks at B-movies with love. And that's at Tat Club on Twitter.
I have a question.
Yes.
Right. I was born a long time ago.
You were?
Not too far away from where you were born, in date-wise, but I was 1980, beginning of 1980. What does that make me?
That makes you
because
the same as me.
There's different opinions on what I am.
Well, I've looked into this because of Right in the Childhood, and people born between 1978 and 1982 can claim a micro-generation.
Which is all 3 of us, isn't it?
Yeah, that is actually all 3 of us.
Yeah.
And it's essentially, it acknowledges that there was a transition between Generation X and Millennial that you can't really put a firm end of. But essentially people like us had analog childhoods and digital adulthoods. And we're called Zennials. And it kind of melds X and Millennial into one. And it basically means that we're kind of in the same kind of like financial situation and the same kind of age group as Generation X folk, but we have kind of millennial outlooks on life. So there you go. You're technically Generation X, Kurt, but you can claim Zennial, which I like, so I do.
Right. Thank you for that, because it's been bugging me over the last couple of weeks, strangely enough. I don't know why I started searching it.
No,
and then
what
I was like,
generation am I?
What generation do I actually belong to here? Because one says one and somewhere else it says another, and it didn't make any sense. But
you say this, and Fraser, my co-host on Right in the Childhood, he's in the same situation as us, but in between Millennial and Generation Z. For years, he'd thought he was a millennial, and then they just chopped his generation, said, right, Generation Z has started now. So they haven't got like a meldy name for that yet.
Toddler.
But he's
a toddler.
He's 24.
That counts as toddler.
Okay.
Anyway, no, thank you for that. No, that was really, I really wanted to know that. That was a genuine question because I was struggling over it for about an hour. Going to different websites.
Yeah, well, I've done all the same research as you because, like I say, the whole idea of that podcast is generations. So, it's I find it fascinating, but some people might not. So we should probably wrap up our Red Dwarf podcast talking about random shit.
Absolutely.
So thank you for listening to Shipwrecked and Comatose. We'll be back next week where we'll be covering the final episode of Series 2. We'll be looking at Parallel Universe. Until then,
Zennials.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Observing the pattern.
a fringe podcast. You know, you'd have a doctor saying, oh, well, it's because, you know, if someone's come back from the dead, it's because they were frozen and their body temperature warmed up, or, you know, oh, they ingested this poison that, you know, made it look like death, or whatever it was, rather than it being a miracle that's seen as the more outlandish thing. So it's quite interesting seeing the roles reversed here. Because I know our sympathies lie with Walter, but then equally, I felt kind of sorry for the priest, who's just like, right, you realise this is mad, right?
Yeah.
There's no part of this that is safe.
Life's milestones.
Sleepwalkers. Took him to see that.
That Stephen King thing with the evil cat people.
About the incestuous cat people, yeah.
Goodness sake.
And also Natural Born Killers was another one I went to see with my dad.
How old were you?
Well, he used to sneak me in. I was about 14. Yeah, so he'd go and buy the tickets, and I'd go and get the popcorn, and he'd be like, right, let's go. Bearing in mind, my dad at the time was the detective sergeant of the West Midlands Drug Squad.
The time is now. A Millennium podcast.
Yeah, I think when we get to Skull and Bones, the final scene in that one where he gives his reasons to Emma, I think that has been criticised quite much. But then obviously we'll look at Peter Watts over the course of the season.
But that's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Because I mean, how many times that's what people in his position say.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you hate me and you think I'm doing bad, but when the food runs out, who are you going to blame? That goes back to 3 Days of the Condor, right?
Yeah.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.